Hello, my name is Evan DeMarsh. I'm with the Trends Journal. I'm here with Larry Johnson, a former CIA analyst and head of Sonar21.com. He'll be talking about updates in Ukraine and Israel. Larry, thank you for joining the Trends Journal.
Hey, Ed, I always appreciate the invite. Honored to be associated with you folks.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Larry. I wanted to start right off the bat from an interview. We both know Judge Napolitano. He had John Mearsheimer on his program yesterday. And I heard Mearsheimer gave a pretty interesting analysis on the Ukraine war. And he said how it seems like Trump is, of course, this is paraphrasing. It seems like Trump is constantly trying to get past the Russiagate and how Russiagate breaks out and Trump starts providing Ukraine with offensive weaponry. Potentially giving Ukraine the moxie or the confidence to go to war with Russia. I guess the question I have for you, I'd love to hear your opinion. How much does Russiagate, how much can you tie Russiagate to the Ukraine war, and would it have ever started, in your opinion, if not for the weapons that Trump gave to Ukraine and where we are now?
It predates Russiagate, but Russiagate is simply an extension of what the deep state was trying to do. So we need to step back and understand, why did they put together this operation? Starting in 2015, that's when Russiagate really began. In the summer of 2015, when John Brennan, then the head of the CIA, working with Hillary Clinton's campaign, set up a task force. There was an intelligence collection effort. It was being carried out primarily through the National Security Agency, but there was being sort of the analytical work was being done at CIA. And they were initially collecting on all the presidential candidates, both on the Republican side, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush, as well as Bernie Sanders. So this was being done at the behest of the Clinton campaign. One of the early concerns identified about Donald Trump was he was talking about getting out of NATO, that to reduce U.S. commitment to Europe. So that made him right off the bat sort of target number one. And as the primary season progressed and it got underway in December, we had a conversation, email exchange between John Podesta, the campaign manager, and a Democrat operative by the name of Brent Budowski, in which they talked about pinning the Russian bromance with Putin on Trump. In other words, making Trump appear to be a stooge, a great buddy of Putin. Again, all of this was designed to prevent Trump and anybody else from being able to normalize relations with Russia. What's fascinating historically, when you go back, when Putin first took over as acting prime minister in August of 1999, and then he was cemented in that position in December of 99, the coverage of Putin was generally positive in the West. I mean, Barbara Waters, Barbara Wawa, she did a sort of a glowing interview with him. Putin was being praised. Hell, Putin was getting praised by the likes of Michael McFaul, if you can believe that. And McFaul is one of these diehard neocons and big advocates for going to war with Russia. But the turn came in 2003 when Bush decided to invade Iraq, and Vladimir Putin opposed it. And you can go back and document that that's when the negative press, the attacks on Putin as an authoritarian, etc., that all started up then, because Putin wouldn't go along with invading Iraq. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight now, Putin was exactly right. So when Trump comes into office, one of the other sort of curiosities is if you go back to 1995, 96, so under Bill Clinton's regime, the United States started conducting NATO and U.S. EUCOM military exercises where Ukraine was a part of it. But in the early years under Clinton, there were 2 to 3, and then under George W. Bush, there were 3, sometimes 4. Under Barack Obama, they would hover between 3 and 4, and more often than 4. Under Donald Trump, 5 exercises a year. So the number of exercises being done each year expanded under Donald Trump. And it was during this period that you find that more military exercises were being carried out in Ukraine with NATO, with U.S. forces, than 24 of the other NATO countries. I mean, it was like, what the hell? Ukraine's not even a member of NATO, and it's got more NATO exercises going on it than 24 of the other NATO members. And it was during that period that Trump decided, was cajoled by the Department of Defense to supply lethal weapons, the anti-tank guided missiles. Also, it was one of those exercises that took place in September of, I believe it was 2020. Someone at the Pentagon thought it was a really good idea to have a B-52 bomber fly along the Black Sea coast by Russia. I mean, nothing says, hey, we want to have peace with you because we're flying our nuclear-equipped bomber at your country. So once Trump was, when he came into office, he had very little leeway to try to normalize relations with Russia for fear of being accused that, he was, in fact, under the control of Russia. And we've seen the documents that have been released recently by Tulsi Gabbard underscore that it was Barack Obama, it was the FBI, it was the CIA, all were gunning for Trump. And legal traps were laid to try to ensnare him that he avoided. So this war, let's call it the preconditions for the war, were certainly laid out during Russiagate.
Is this something that is still an issue with Trump now? We saw when he met with Putin in Alaska, a lot of the media coverage was that he looked inferior to Putin. He looked like he was outmatched by Putin's wit. He was on the red carpet with Putin. They said, oh, who else would Trump do this for? Is this still a noose around Trump's neck? Is this hurting negotiations with Ukraine and bringing it into the war, his supposed relationship with Putin? Is this something he can get through?
He's trying to. If he would have greeted any other world leader the way he greeted Putin, nobody'd be saying anything. They'd be praising him. Oh, that's great. Look at his warm relationships. Oh my God, Vladimir Putin. And the mythology that has been erected around Putin is really astonishing, because they say, oh, he's a KGB officer. Those KGB men, they're killers. They're sneaky. They're diabolical. He was a lawyer. Okay. Yes, he joined the KGB, but he was a lawyer, for God's sake. He went to law school. Hey, I was the CIA. That doesn't mean I'm not some skilled assassin. No, so it's just this guilt by association without actually explaining what is it that he did precisely that showed him to be so, quote, diabolical. Now, if you want to fault him for being a lawyer, there was a reason that Shakespeare said, kill the lawyers, okay? I've had personal experience where we did money laundering cases. In one case, we had 3. We had an informant of the Cali cartel. We had an informant from the Sinaloa cartel, and we had a Russian mobster as an informant. And I swear to God, we found those 3 criminals more honorable and trustworthy than any of the lawyers we were working with at the time. Okay, just saying. I've had the experience with the criminals. I've had the experience with the lawyers. I'll take the criminals any day. But I'll give Putin a pass. But because one of the things that happens with lawyers when you go to law school, you're taught to think about the world in a particular way. You're taught to think about risk minimization, risk exposure. And when you're trained to think like that, you view the world a different way. That's really how Putin approaches it. Trump and risk. Trump doesn't think like a lawyer, man. He's more like a jazz saxophonist who's high on a mixture of drugs. Okay.
But one of the other things from the interview with Mearsheimer was that he contends that Trump doesn't want this Ukraine to become his own personal Afghanistan. And he saw what happened with Joe Biden with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, essentially losing Afghanistan under his watch. This is something that plays on Trump's mind, and he doesn't want the same outcome with Ukraine, that he's the president who lost Ukraine. How important do you think that is in Trump's decision making? Because recently Trump just announced, or the White House, $825 million in new weapons for Ukraine. They had the sanctions against India, the 25% sanctions for buying Russian oil. Is Trump right now doubling down on his support for Ukraine to just drag the war out now?
Well, it's not really going to drag the war. I think you're correct, or Mearsheimer's correct, that Trump is taking these steps so he can say, look, I did everything possible to try to stop this, but didn't have the cooperation of Zelensky, number one. But at the same time, I cannot rule out the possibility that Trump told Putin behind the scenes, say, look, I know you're going to win this war. I know there's nothing that we can really do to turn that around, but I cannot afford to be seen as giving in to you. So these are the things I'm going to do. I just understand it's not really sincere about following through. Maybe he said that. Maybe that's why that Putin's not as excited and reactive to some of the things that Trump is doing. Because, the other day when Trump declared, when Sergei Lavrov told Kristen Welker at NBC that the Russians, while they accept Zelensky as the de facto president, they don't view him as a legitimate president. And the reason they don't view him as legitimate is because he has declared martial law, suspended the election that was supposed to take place, and that even if he signs an agreement now, once elections are taken or held, he's unlikely to be reelected, and whoever comes in next will be in a position to completely repudiate anything that Zelensky signed. And yet, in response to that, Trump yelled, said that was bullshit, using his term, not mine, and that accused the Russians of just posturing. Well, the Russians are doing anything but posturing. They've been very clear for more than a year and a half what their views, what their demands are, and they haven't backed off from that at all. So, again, maybe Trump's trying to walk a tightrope here. If he's not, he is then, by his actions, signaling, trying to continue this war. The only problem is the United States does not have the military weapon stockpiles, equipment to send to Ukraine. Even if Europe buys it from us, we don't have it stored up in warehouses. And Ukraine's manpower is shrinking. We saw yesterday, very curiously, Ukraine basically lifted the ban on travel for 18 to 22-year-olds. Now, remember, the West has been pushing Ukraine desperately to enlist those 18 to 22-year-olds, haul them into the army, make them fight.
Yeah, Blinken, right? Blinken was speaking to that. Yeah,
and Lindsey Graham. So you got to step back and say, okay, why did Ukraine do this? Why did they suddenly say, okay, you guys can leave the country? And man, the 18 to 22-year-olds were lined up at the border. I believe it is that there are still some in the Ukrainian government that recognize the war is over. Ukraine is going to lose, and they don't want to risk destroying the lives of these boys, young men, who will be the next generation of fathers. If they put them into the cannon fodder, no fathers, no children, Ukraine becomes a dead society. And so I think the fact that now at this juncture, they're letting them go, that tells me that even the Ukrainians know that the jig is up. This thing's coming to an end.
Ukraine would tell, I bet officials from Kyiv would tell you that they're doing a really good job, an effective job in hitting Russian infrastructure. There was a fuel shortage that I read about in Crimea, and they've been hitting refineries and some pipelines across Russia. Every time that I read an article about that, I wonder how much more Russia's willing to take before it escalates even more. It's like, do you think Russia has a time limit that they'll say, hey, we don't want to keep getting these attacks either, and we're going to have to make a move to stop these attacks? Do you see Russia escalating or sending a message to Washington that, these drone strikes have to stop?
No, I think I think the reports out of Ukraine about what's hitting Russia is exaggerated. Yeah, they have hit some refineries, they've caused some damage, but the scale of Russia's oil refineries and oil industry is huge. It's not one or two places that get knocked out. The Russians continue to shoot the majority of drones down that are used to attack. But that's why they're pressing on with their offensive. So up to this point, despite a number of provocations, I mean, let's go back to in June, the terrorist attack, or into May, the terrorist attack that took place in Bryansk, where the bridge was blown up, crashed on a train, killed several. Not even in response to that was Russia willing to turn from what it calls a special military operation to a full-fledged war. And what it means to go to full-fledged war is then the entire Russian society will be mobilized. All industry, all economic activity will be subjected to the military goal. Right now, they've got, fighting, let's call it more of a police action of sorts. And yet they're able to continue to move forward. In some places, they're moved forward slowly. And, you hear a lot of former generals in the West who are retired now, ridicule and criticize Russia for this. I just remind those clowns, they spent 21 years and couldn't contain the Taliban in Afghanistan. So they just need to shut the hell up. They have no credibility to talk about this whatsoever. Whereas Russia keeps moving forward. The last body exchange, the 19 dead Russians were turned over, and the Russians returned 1,000 dead Ukrainians. I used to say that was a 20-1 difference. My math was bad. That's 50-1. Okay? For every one dead Russian, 50 dead Ukrainians. Now, some will say, yeah, but that's because the Russians are advancing. Exactly. They're not retreating. They're advancing. Who's retreating? You, the Ukrainians, which means you're losing. For the lack of consistency in all of this logic just drives me crazy. So, and that 50-1 exchange rate, that's been going on for about 3 months. The Russians currently estimate the killed and wounded on the Ukrainian side is approaching 400,000 since January alone, just this year. And now we're only 8 months into it. We're starting into the 9th month. So it is. Russia is pursuing the war at its own pace. It would prefer to achieve a negotiated outcome. That's what it, in the earlier days of the special military operation, that's why they only invaded with 125,000 troops. And because they thought it would bring Ukraine to the negotiating table, and it did. And they had an agreement fleshed out until it was canceled by the United States and Great Britain.
That was in Turkey, right?
When they met in Turkey. Istanbul.
Yeah. I'd like to hear your opinion on this, Larry. When Trump's critics say that he could pick up the phone and end the Ukraine and the war in Gaza in one phone call, do you think that that's true, that Trump has that ability if he wanted to?
Yes.
He could end both in your view.
Yes. Yeah. You just tell Zelensky, it's very clear. Effective immediately. We're suspending all intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance support to your government. We're withdrawing all CIA and military personnel from Ukraine. We're halting all funds to your country. And oh, by the way, you no longer have a visa that'll get you into the United States. We're pulling that too, unless you put an end to this now.
What do you think? What do you think Zelensky would do if Trump gave him that phone call? Do you think he would go to? Of course, this is speculation. Do you think he'd go to Europe? Would he go to Berlin? Would he go to Paris and say, "I just got this phone call from Trump. I need you guys to step up a little bit more"? And do you think that they would be there for him?
Yeah, Zelensky going to Europe like that would be like a 28-year-old woman who wanted to have a child, wanted to get pregnant, and she went to a 90-year-old guy with erectile dysfunction. Same result.
That's a descriptive image. But so now, if we could move on to Israel, and I'd like to hear your opinion on Netanyahu's recent comment that MAGA is basically Israel plays a major point in the MAGA movement, and you're not MAGA unless you're pro-Israel. And I guess what he is saying there is that Israel is so important to the U.S. strategically in the Middle East that if you are America first, if you are Make America Great Again, you can't avoid having a country like Israel in the Middle East that's doing your battles for you, essentially. What, do you reject that comment?
Oh, completely. It's MAGA. It's MAGA, not MEGA. It's not Make Israel Great Again. It's Make America Great Again, which means America first, except we're now being told, and we've even heard it from Tammy Bruce at State Department, that Israel's the greatest country with America second. You know, we saw it with Mike Huckabee talking about the supremacy of Israel. There was a recent viral video posted on TikTok by an American sergeant who faces potential court-martial because he posted on his social media that he supported America, not Israel. And he's been threatened with legal action. And as he said, I swore an oath to the Constitution to defend the Constitution on behalf of America, not Israel. So Israel's, we know that Israel's in big trouble right now for the simple fact that Bibi Netanyahu is making the rounds on a variety of internet YouTube platforms. Patrick Bet-David is one. And Bet-David himself has got quite a reputation for, pyramid schemes in the past. So, maybe it's good that one scamster goes to another scamster, or at least alleged scamster. But the fact that Netanyahu is going on there trying to do the spend patrol, it just shows you how much trouble they're in. The average person on the internet, on social media, who's under the age of 45, is not supporting Israel. The ones who are the most supportive of Israel are, the ones like me, my age. If you're 65 and older, we've been propagandized all of our lives to celebrate Israel as this, beacon of hope, little David against the nasty big Goliath Arabs, all that nonsense. Instead of recognizing that now they're the murderous thugs. They're the ones killing children. They are the biggest terrorist element in the Middle East. If your definition of terrorism is the use of violence against civilians for political means, I can show you the hard data from the Israeli Foreign Ministry that between the year 2000 and April of 2024, Hamas, or not just Hamas, all of the Palestinian groups, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, there are like 18, 19 of them. All of those Palestinians combined killed a grand total of 1,572 Israelis over a 25-year period. Israel now, in the space of 23 months, killed a minimum of 65,000. The numbers may be as high as 300,000. Don't tell me that Hamas is this massive terrorist group and that Israel is the beacon of freedom and democracy. The numbers tell a different story. Like I said, those numbers I gave you about Hamas, go look them up. They're on the Israeli Foreign Ministry site. Not my numbers. That is the government of Israel's numbers. Facts are tough to deal with in this when we're being fed such a major load of male bovine excrement.
It looks like the ethnic cleanse of Gaza looks like a foregone conclusion right now, doesn't it? It looks like nobody's even reporting on it anymore.
They're trying to do it, but Israel's now been threatening to go in and clean it out for 3 weeks and haven't done it.
But they've been softening it up, right? With bombings in the outskirts of Gaza City, or
they're trying, but they're going to learn like the Germans did at Stalingrad. When you blow up all this rubble, you create more hiding places, more cover for the guerrilla force fighting you, and they are killing Israelis. So that's one of the reasons the head of the Israeli Defense Force doesn't want to go down that road. And so there is a confrontation coming between the Israeli Defense Force and Netanyahu.
Because Netanyahu will just keep pushing it.
Yes.
And anyone, and his leader, like even Yoav Gallant, the guy who is accused by the ICC of war crimes, he wasn't seen loyal enough to Netanyahu, and he had to leave the job. I don't know if he was fired or not, but I know Netanyahu's son, who lives in Miami, came out against him.
Yeah,
and said he was insubordination. Do you see Arab countries in the region, are they going to still sit on the sidelines? Is there a red line for them as they watch Gaza unfold, as they watch what happens in the West Bank unfold? Is there a red line, you think, for Saudi Arabia and Qatar and those other Arab countries in the region?
They're useless. They're Western prostitutes.
So they won't do anything.
No, are you kidding? And sadly, unfortunately, even the BRICS nations are not. Russia, India, China in particular, or Brazil, they could do a lot more. They could declare a total embargo. In fact, it would be good for BRICS to come out and say, we now as BRICS as a whole are declaring a total embargo on Israel, no imports, no exports, no business transactions until the genocide in Gaza stops. That's the only thing that's going to get Israel's attention to stop. Otherwise, you don't see the political will in the United States or Europe to do anything. They're going to continue to send them money and weapons.
What would the U.S. do if the BRICS said that? How do you think the U.S. would respond to that?
Well, the U.S. say, oh, well, we're going to have Israel's back. Great. But Israel doesn't do enough business with the United States for the United States to pick up the slack.
So why don't the BRICS do that?
I don't know.
Huh.
I would love to have that conversation with one of them. If I have a chance to sit down with Foreign Minister Lavrov again, that's a new question I'll have for him. You guys in Russia in particular have you're in a unique position where you can really have some influence here. Why aren't you using it?
Do you see, and this is my last question, Larry, thank you so much for joining me. Do you see any kind of shift in the U.S. as far as policy goes, as far as the public's opinion of Israel? Because we just saw John Sullivan, the former national security advisor for Biden, come out and say, if he had the vote, he would vote to withhold weapons for Israel.
Yeah.
And is that some kind of a shift? Is this becoming more mainstream, you think, in at least the Democratic Party, towards Israel?
Yeah, it's important to recognize that this is, they try to portray any criticism of the Zionists in Israel for their conduct of this genocide as anti-Semitism. The problem they're having is they've got a growing number of young Jews, of teenagers in their 20s and 30s, who are speaking out against this and condemning it. So they can't continue to call it anti-Semitism when it's Jews who are opposing this policy as well. Part of the enablers in all of this are these Christian Zionists who are not Jewish, but who are backing the most evil infliction of violence in recent memory on defenseless people. So the winds are changing, and you got a clear sign of that. Just the fact that Bibi Netanyahu felt he needed to do at least 2 or 3 different podcasts on YouTube this week. Yeah, he had nothing better to do. No, he recognizes they got a PR problem, and all of his spin is not going to help shut it down.
I lied. This is my last question, Larry. Tom Barak, he's the special envoy in the Middle East for Trump, and he was in Beirut I think 2 days ago or 3 days ago, and he told reporters during a press conference not to be animalistic.
Yeah.
And remain calm. And he was criticized widely on social media. And as look at the U.S. hubris when dealing with this part of the world. Do you agree with that assessment when he told that to reporters there?
Yeah, he views them as subhumans. Doesn't view them as people worthy of respect. He said, "You're animals, bunch of animals." Oh, I think Barack, good God. What a terrible choice. He instead of really working to bring peace to the region, he's just a guy with a cup of gasoline and a lit match, and he's gonna ignite a big fire, and it's gonna spread.
Well, that seems like Trump's his current status there. He wants Huckabee in Israel. Barack is a special envoy. Even Steve Witkoff hasn't done anything as far as his negotiations, and Hamas can't trust him, nor can Iran. But on that, you're saying something?
Well, I just said we saw Huckabee the other day, and then being interviewed by two rabbis. And man, this is one of the most obscene displays of verbal fellatio I've ever seen. He was, you are God's chosen people. And I was like, I'll get into all the twisted theology that when you have a theological position that you believe that there's this supreme being who's the creator of everything, but he likes this particular group of people better than everybody else, to the point that he says, you got special permission to go kill all these other members of my creation. And oh boy, that's our God. Sorry, I don't buy that kind of nonsense. If you watched a parent, whether mother or father, 5 kids, and the parent chooses one child over all the other 4, I'm going to give you the best food, the best clothes, the best education, the best medical care. I love you more than everybody else. If you're a neighbor or a relative, you'd call the child abuse hotline on that woman or that guy and report them for child abuse. So you get the government officials in there to pull the other kids out, get them into foster homes where they're not going to be abused.
Yeah.
Well, that's the image that Huckabee's portraying of God with the Jews. And it's not Jews, it's these Zionist crazies.
But Huckabee's position was just repeated, or even Lindsey Graham about a month ago said, if we pull the plug on Israel, God will pull the plug on the United States.
Yeah.
And you saw, obviously, the Cruz interview with Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
That kind of got the whole conversation going.
Yeah, it's nonsense. The notion that the only way you can be a good Christian is you got to say, oh, Jews first. I mean, it's just a damnable lie. And it's one of the worst forms of propaganda. But unfortunately, it carries a lot of weight in the United States. So Israel first, make Israel great again. And as that one sergeant who's facing charges said, I swore an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. My goal is to defend America first, not Israel.
On that note, Larry Johnson, right before Labor Day weekend, thank you for joining the Trends Journal. Everyone, please go to Sonar 21 to check out Larry's latest work. And please follow him on all social media and YouTube. I know I follow Larry, and just to stay up to date with what the consensus is. Larry, thank you so much for joining us.
Ed, always a privilege, and thanks for having me on the Trends Journal.
Enjoy your weekend.
Okay, will do. Thanks.